Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome back to the Glassman's world. So today we're going to be talking about beginner glassblowing lessons. I just recently decided this year, 2025, I'm going to be focusing on beginner glassblowing lessons and really focusing on doing some teaching here and explaining how to get started. There's a few videos I put out, I believe last year, which talk about setting up the table, setting up the studio again, and getting things all ready for blowing glass, for getting started. The tools that you need, the torch, the hoses, the regulators, the oxygen and propane tanks, the carbon graphite tools that we use, the where's my reamer? One of the most important tools is not here. Where's my reamer? Okay, I gotta find my reamer real quick. Maybe it fell on the floor. Hopefully it didn't, because it could crack that way. Let me see if it's anywhere over here. And so yeah, I wanted to discuss how to get started in blowing glass, the things that you need, the tools that you need, and also kind of very soon I wanted to, oh, here it is. There's my reamer. One of the most important tools. Can't lose that. So you got a reamer, you got your pad, you got your paddle, you got your tweezers, you got your torch, you got the hoses, the regulators, the tanks. You have a table with hardy backer, which is compressed cement board. Different tools, grabbers, bowl pushers for making paraphernalia and things like that. Measuring tools like digital calipers, so then you can take a measurement and be extremely precise, especially when making body jewelry, gauges, earrings, things like that. Glass cutters. What else do I use here? So we have different tools like glass cutters, scribes, or scoring tools, which I don't know where my scoring tool is. And then this, where is that tool? This tool, this is a nice scoring tool right here for cutting glass, tubes and rods. So I have that tool as well. So there's several different tools. Also the kiln is very important. So there's a lot of different tools that's necessary for getting into glass blowing, making glass. And then the cost of it. When I first got started, I was able to get most of my equipment for about $500 or less. But I was working on a simple torch, a National 3A, which only ran, I think like $150 with the torch. With, I had a couple tips that were like $30 each. I think the torch itself was like maybe around $65 to $80. And then you would have the different items. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked over here, realizing we got a lot of big mess over here. We got all kinds of plastic and paper, a lot of jewelry and baggies and things. So I'm trying to get rid of stuff. I haven't really blown glass much in a while, and so I haven't kept my desk very clean. It's just been kind of piling up with other things here. I got these also on the side. So very soon we're gonna do this, or we're gonna try out some really weird granola bars. Some really weird flavored granola bars. We're gonna do that someday soon here as well. But getting back to blowing glass, so um, you know, we're gonna go over all the different things like the pricing. Like I was saying, you would have the National 3A torch, which was about 60 to 80 bucks. The tips, which are around $30, and then a stand. So you'd have a torch stand, which I believe was around 30 to 50 bucks back in the day. So 200 bucks or less will get you a torch. You can also buy a miner torch. There's also the glass torch technologies, the GTTs, and those they have some very small torches that are around $200 that you can get started with making small glassware, beads, pendants, jewelry, earrings, marbles, maybe even making a little bit smaller pieces that are made with tubing instead of like solid glass, like rods and stuff. You know, getting all your glass so that way you have plenty of glass. Glass color runs at about $60 a pound, but then there are some glass that's out there that is extremely expensive and costs a lot more. But generally about $60 a pound for colored glass. Clear glass is about $6 a pound. Um, I don't know if those prices are current because I'm just going off of what I remember from a few years ago, and I haven't really looked into a lot of that. So for today, oh, and also of course you need your protective eyewear, your didymium glasses. So these are special lenses, the didymium glasses, which allow you to see through the flame, see through the sodium flare. So when I start blowing glass here, you guys are only going to see like a really bright light. And I've attempted to put different lenses over because I have another lens somewhere over here that's separated. I don't know where it's at, but I have a lens somewhere here that's it's from a pair of broken glasses, and I've tried to put it over the camera lens, and it doesn't work. It's still, the camera picks up the sodium flare. So for today, we're gonna basically get started with a very simple technique. It's called just gathering glass. So this is how you would get started with when you first start blowing glass. You want to learn how to gather glass. So the first thing that you need to learn how to do is learning how to spin the glass in your hand. And so whenever I have students who are really serious about coming to learn how to blow glass, I ask them to get, like get a pencil, get a pen, something like this. You just get a pen, get a pencil, and start to, you want to put it in your hand in a way where you're holding it, it's kind of positioned right here, and you want to be able to have it to where when you release your thumb, you're still able to hold it like that, right? And then you use your thumb and you use your fingers here, and as you can see, all my fingers are basically in motion. It's kind of like an insect or a bug, a spider, how they kind of just crawl. So you have to learn how to get your fingers to spin and rotate some sort of a rod, whether it's tubing or hollow rod, some sort of a, like a stick or a straight piece of something. If you had a dowel stick that was longer, it would be better. I've been able to give away simple, like I could easily just give someone a tube of glass, because I always have these extra glass, right? So I can always give someone this, but once they drop it, it's broken, right? And so you could learn how to just start spinning this. I've also told people that get yourself a jar of honey, so then let's pretend this is honey, right? And then you dip your your tip into the honey and you start to spin it. So you put it in, spin it in the honey, and that honey will gather on the tip, right? And then pull it out slowly, and you'll get the stringer of the honey to pull away, and then it'll all gather onto the tip, right? And then your job is to continuously spin it in a very consistent rotation. And also, you don't want to be bouncing it, because a lot of people, when they first start spinning the glass, they don't know how to do it. And a lot of people also just try to do this, or they just spin it halfway, and they're just like rotating their finger, but you have to actually rotate it. I've studied glass blowers where they'll do like 1-2 rotations and 1 rotation back, 1-2 rotations and 1 rotation back, as a way of keeping the molten glass in balance. Because once the glass gets hot, it physically will start to slow down. The solid glass, it has the torque, it has the grip, right? But once this gets molten, it kind of falls back. It slowly, like, it doesn't spin just as much because it becomes liquefied. And that glass will eventually start to spin back this way while you're spinning it this way. So sometimes your pattern, if you have lines and you're trying to keep them straight, you'll have to learn how to spin it one way and then spin it back. Spin it one way and then spin it back. And you get a counter rotation going, and then you can learn to spin it with your left hand and become ambidextrous and learn how to not bounce it up and down. Like I said, a lot of people, when they first start blowing or start just spinning anything in their hands, they do this, like they can't keep it straight. And you need to keep this part straight. Like, basically pretend that your finger is a fire, right? And then just do that. Make sure that is always constantly right there at the tip, because then eventually you want to learn how to get into the flame and put it just right on the side of the flame right there. You can see how it glows. As soon as it touches, it starts to glow. I'm seeing through the flame, and it has a glow still, but it's not as bright and as intense as what you see. So I can still see the tip of the glass, which is kind of glowing right now, and I can see it through the flame, through that yellow. There's no yellow with the didymium lenses that I'm wearing. So you need to have specific glass blowing glasses. They're didymium lenses. They're not welder shades. They're not, you can't get these at a welder shop. And then you just basically, you start to spin this, and the tip will eventually just start to gather. And you can form this into what I use my scraps like this as a punty. And now this flame is soft, so I need to bring the propane up some. When you learn to turn on the torch, there's what do you call it, an anagram, where it's called poop. Propane, oxygen, oxygen, propane. So when you're ever turning up the flame, you turn up the propane first, then the oxygen. And if you ever turn it down or turn off the torch, then you turn oxygen and then propane. So there's, you can completely shut it off entirely, oxygen first, then the propane, or turn the propane on, then oxygen. And that's the anagram poop. Propane, oxygen, then oxygen, propane. When you're turning it on, propane, oxygen. Turning it off, oxygen, propane. So when you're turning up the flame, you want to also learn the flame and how the flame works. And you don't want to have too much of this to be glowing. You don't want it to have too much propane and too little oxygen. And you also don't want to have too much oxygen and not enough propane. You got to have the ratio right with what you're working with. So you keep it somewhere in this little range here, somewhere like that. And if you bring up your flame, well, then you just got to match that oxygen or the propane to it. You don't want to have a soft reduction flame like this where that wouldn't melt it. You'd want to have something a little bit more intense like this, but you definitely don't want to have too much oxygen to where it's just way too much, you know? Now, in some instances, you may want to actually use a high level oxygen like that and low propane for making holes, popping out holes in a solid glass, the wall of a tubing. You know, you can pop a hole right through the tubing. So right now I'm gathering all that glass, and it went from a little tiny, like a little bump at the end right there, to now all of this has been gathered, and there's a nice thick piece of glass right there on the top of the tubing. So this is all hollow, and that's now solid on top. That's now a nice punchy to where I can then use this to attach it to different pieces when I'm working. You know, when I'm making different pieces, sometimes I have to attach a punchy on the bottom to then finish up the top. You can't hold hot glass and molten glass in your hand, so you need to have ways to be able to hold it and float it into in the torch. Alright, so today what I'd like to show you is how to get a rod. And a lot of times when you start out, the rods are jagged on both ends. When you get a rod, they're normally 4 foot long, 5 foot long, and they're cut. You know, they just basically, they score it, then they break the rod, and then they make them into 4 foot lengths, so then they can ship them to us. And then that way we can use them. We cut them down into the sizes we need. This is actually 2 pieces of scrap glass, like this here, that I then fuse together. I melt these ends, fuse it together to make them one piece, all put together. So you can see, and this was actually put together a couple times, one time here and one time right here. So you can see the seals right here, but this is basically a rod that is nice and straight that I've put together. And then I just decide, okay, which side do I want to start spinning the glass on? So when I can go here, I can go here. It doesn't really matter. I kind of like the feel of this side. It's a little bit longer right here, and my fingers aren't on those bumps. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce this into the flame. So when it's cut sharp and jagged like this, there is always a possibility when you put this in the flame, some pieces, little chunks, might actually like pop off the edge, pop off. So you want to kind of like sit back away from the torch. You definitely don't want to be like with your face like right, you never want to have your face right up in the torch. You got to remember, this is super hot, super intense flame. You can actually get a sunburn from the flame, from the heat. So you want to stay back. We also have larger torch on the bottom here, and when you're working with the bigger torch, you definitely want to have distance away from the torch. I recently was cleaning this out, so it's kind of all dusty and dirty. A lot of impurities are inside of there. But in recent years, I've basically reeled back to using only the top torch here, my smaller torch. It has a 12-hole point tip. So there's 12 holes, 12 ports of flame that are coming out of this one torch tip right here. So when I introduce it, we're going to go right to the edge, And I like to kind of just go on one side and just let it heat up just a little bit. And if it's gonna pop, it would pop right there. If it's gonna, like, any kind of glass, from introducing it from cold into a very intense hot flame. Now you can only do that with this kind of glass, with borosilicate glass. With soft glass, Moretti Bullseye, I don't know it because I don't work soft glass, Moretti and Bullseye. But I would imagine that you want to really be slow and gentle and just introduce the glass into the flame, get it warm on one side, let the glass kind of take in the heat, and then you slowly rotate it to the other side, and you allow that to get hot, and then you just start to rotate it. Then that's when you start to actually spin your hand, or spin the glass in your hand like I was showing you. And being able, like I said, if you don't have your thumb on it, you should be able to still hold the glass. Somehow it's just locked in perfectly right in there. So if I let go, even if I rotate it this way, I'm still holding on to it. So you have to learn how to hold the glass, how to spin the glass, how to slowly introduce it to the flame, making sure you don't have too much oxygen. Higher intense flame with oxygen would really, really like make things crack and pop. And then when you get into introducing colors, there are some colors that are more stressed out and can't handle that intense flame and that heat. So right now, what we're doing is we're basically just taking the jagged piece of glass that's on this end here, because this is the hot end right now. So we're taking that really sharp, jagged piece of glass, and then we're rounding it out, we're melting it. So as you can see, it's already rounded out just from introducing it into the flame. And we're just going to slowly round it out, get rid of any of the sharp jaggedness of it. And then you can also see it's a little lopsided, right? Like there's one side has more glass than the other. It's a little bit leaning. So we're going to have to round that out as well. So this is called gathering glass. This is the very first thing that you would learn how to do in lamp working. So lamp working is what I do. It's a form of glass blowing. This is known as lamp working. The torch is the lamp. It's not that I'm making lamps, although I can make glass lamps and chandeliers and things like that. But this is called lamp working or torch work. So I'm a torch worker or I'm a lamp worker. Now, what I like to do is when the ends are really jagged like this, I basically will get my tweezers, and these are like, I don't know, 9-inch, 10-inch, something like maybe a foot. I don't really know. I don't have a ruler to measure them. I think they're about 10-inch, something like that. That's too long. Maybe even 9. They're probably 9. So these long nose tweezers, I'm going to basically grab this glass when it gets molten, and we're going to pull it off, and it's going to allow this part that's a little bit more on this side to even out with this side, and then we'll have a nice clean end. So we're basically just going to clean this up, and this is how you start out with getting any rod ready to go for making a mushroom, a spiral, or anything like that. So we will turn this into something here, but I'm focusing on the fact that all we're doing is gathering the glass. So, and then also, once you start seeing with the digymium lenses, you'll be able to start seeing the sharp, jagged point of it actually has these little tiny air bubbles because of the glass being jagged and whatever. So you want to grab all of that. You'll see it when you're looking through with the digymium lenses, and you'll be able to determine how much glass you want to take off and scrap. So this now goes into the scrap jar right here. So I have a little scrap jar. I think you can maybe see the edge of it here. It's just a jar. A lot of people will fill it up with water. I just do dry jars. I don't know why. It can crack the glass though. This borosilicate glass can easily crack this simple glass that's over here. So that's why they put water in it so it doesn't crack it. But I'm just like, whatever. If it cracks, then I just got a big mess to clean. So now we're back to where we were. Now it's not rounded anymore. There's a pointy little tip on there. So we now have to introduce that back into the flame and get this rounded out. So it's already warm. We don't have to worry about shocking the glass, it exploding or shattering right into your face or on your hands or out anywhere, hitting the TV screen over there, the monitor, or wherever, dropping onto the floor, shooting back at you, landing on your lap. When you first start blowing glass, I would highly recommend standing up, because when you sit down, you kind of get a little bit lazy, and hot glass can fall in your lap. And if you're not quick enough of standing up, it will burn right through your pants, your clothes, whatever you're wearing, especially if you're wearing polyester. That will just melt directly to your skin. And the molten glass will also just stick right to your skin, and it's no fun at all. So now what we've done is we've rounded out that tip. There's no longer a little point on it. It's completely round. So now what we do is we take this glass. Right now it's basically horizontal or parallel with the table, right? What I want to do is create a 45-degree angle by basically bringing my hand down lower than the torch. I want to keep this right where the flame is, but this is now what I angle around. Going up, going down, right? Up and down, 45 this way, 45 down this way. This is horizontal with the table. Now I can also push it out this way, but I got to make sure to keep that tip right here. I can also bring it in towards me this way. Keeping it horizontal with the table, you now have this motion here, going in and out towards you, up and down this way, and a full 360 rotation, to where sometimes you may have to be in that sort of constant motion to make sure that you're moving the glass around, keeping this in the tip, in the torch, while you're moving things around, so you may be up, maybe down. So for gathering this, what we're going to do is we're going to actually round this out to a little, like a marble, on the end of the rod here, okay? And I do need to get going here really soon. I was hoping to just do a quick 1-hour demo, but I started this a little late. I was thinking from 7 till 8 o'clock. It's already 8 o'clock right now. And we're only 30 minutes in. So yeah, I started this 30 minutes late. So I'm holding this horizontal. As you can see, I'm also using my left hand to now hold this up, just as support. This also helps to keep that glass nice and straight, keeping the tip in the flame without it bouncing around. So this is also a nice little trick, although you can also just spin it right in the flame without having to hold it. But this does help to relieve the weight of it. Your forearms will get sore, and your shoulders, because we're now holding our arms up like this. So our arm is up, our elbow is up. Everything is pretty much horizontal with the table. The shoulder, your upper arm, from your deltoid down to your triceps, biceps, all the way to your forearm. And so yeah, you want to make sure that your arm is up, and you're not slacking and holding down like this, because then when you put your arm down, it's really hard it'll give you carpal tunnel. real quick. So you want to get your arm and your hand in a way to where it's nice and straight and not bent all weird while then you're trying to twist. So what we do is we hold this up like this. This is horizontal. We get the tip molten, and then when we want to start gathering, we lower our hand, bringing that down to a 45-degree angle, and that glass is going to start to get molten and liquefied. The weight of itself is going to push down, and it's going to create a bigger surface area. And so you want to have your flame on the tip, but then, as you can see, there's a really hot point and then there's a cool point. You want to go right in between and go underneath that hot point and where that cold point matches. And it's what I call the transition, like on a ramp. You know, I used to be a skateboarder, so you get the transition, you get that curve, right? So right at the curve where it's a little bit bigger and then you got it a little bit more flat, you want to hit the flame pretty much right there. So that's how you gather. Now this top is slightly bigger than this. Now what we want to do is we want to learn how to pull a stringer, right? So we probably should have done the stringer first. I have a stringer. Let's actually just go with the flow here. This is already ready to go. We're going to get this molten again. It's already, as you can see, it's cool. It's not even molten anymore. Borosilicate glass, which is what we're working with here. It's not Moretti or Bullseye. It's not soft glass. This is known as hard glass. This glass takes a lot more heat. That's why we're using the torch at a really intense flame with propane and oxygen. Soft glass uses MAP gas, which I don't know what MAP gas is. Maybe it's a mixture of methane and propane or something. I have no idea. It's called MAP, M-A-P. But yeah, it's a softer glass, so it takes less flame, less intense heat. So now what we're going to do, I'll show you how to pull a stringer here in a moment, but we're going to take this stringer, which is basically a piece of glass that's been pulled out, colored glass. We're going to force it into the molten glass. So now you can see it's molten again, right? And this is one of the first things I ever learned how to do. I'm going to heat this up just barely. We're not going to touch it to the molten clear glass there. Make sure we keep it away. You get that just a little bit hot right on the tip. Did you see that? You're just getting just the tip. Nice and hot. That's going to allow for this to basically spread out. So we're going to go directly into the center of the clear rod, push this in, and I'm going to rotate it to make sure that I'm keeping this push, and I'm going to push this in really hard. As soon as it gets in there, you can see it has nowhere else to go, and the more I push it, the more it spreads out, and then I just have to cut it off that color at the very end to allow for that, basically a stem. So we now have a mushroom cap right here. There's a stem inside that got pushed in, and now we have to get all that air out of there. So the trick is we're going to put the heat directly to the top of the cap. There's like a little triangle pocket, or like a pocket there surrounding the rod, and I got to get it in the flame quick or it can crack. So I'm going to force that flame directly above, so you can see that part of this is sticking out on the other end of the flame here, and I'm directing that flame right on the mushroom cap, and basically at the transition, what we talked about before. And we're going to hold it at a horizontal position for a while. Then we're going to bring it up slightly this way. That's going to allow the molten glass, so as the rod that's around all the color, I just force that color in there, and there's a floating piece of color at the tip right there. And so what I want to do is I want to get all of this glass to get molten from the cap down, from the cap this way. And as I hold it like this, that glass is going to start to, as I'm rotating it this way, and I'm constantly just spinning it in one direction. I'm not too concerned, and sometimes I'll go backwards, but I'm not too concerned about this glass like really falling backwards or anything. It's not a straight line or lines on the outside on the surface. So, but I do actually, like without even knowing it, I actually do spin it backward and then I spin it forward. Now what's happening is all this glass as it's spinning, it gets heavy on top. It starts to collapse slowly down onto that color, that stick of color that's sticking out. And what I want to do is I want to slowly move the heat from this spot here and slowly, like a millimeter at a time, bring it all the way to the tip. Now once you start making these, you'll see how the clear glass will attach to that color, the mushroom stem that's left in there, that rod, the stringer, and you'll see how that color will attach to the clear, or the clear fall down onto the color. And there's this magnification that occurs where as soon as that clear glass is touching around that color rod, that rod looks a lot thicker than the rod that's just floating in the air. So it magnifies it. It makes it seem like it's a lot thicker. And that's when you can really start to follow it. I don't know if you can see that in here or not. It's so hot and molten. But right underneath the cap, I don't know if you can see where it attaches, but it looks like it's a little thicker in one spot, but then all the way down to the end, it's thinner. I don't know if you can see that or not. Thicker right underneath the stem, but then it looks super thin at the end. So that's where the clear glass has attached itself to that stringer. And if you slowly walk it down, walk that flame down to the end, you won't trap any of those air bubbles, and it'll look like that colored glass or the mushroom somehow just magically got put inside of molten glass. And people don't know, when they're just buying these, unless I explain it to them and how it's made, they have no idea how these mushrooms are pushed into molten glass and how they naturally form. So that's why this is one of the first things that I teach, and one of the first things that I was ever taught how to make, is because the natural physical science of this, how the molten glass works with the solid glass, and how by pushing that solid colored glass into clear glass, you now get to see colored glass within the clear glass, and how it hit the spot that wasn't molten, had nowhere else to go, so it basically just had to spread out and implode or explode on the inside of that clear glass and form a mushroom cap very naturally. And then eventually, over time, I'll be able to teach you how to build up, making a ribbon cane, and then building up. So this is a ribbon cane here, and then turning this ribbon cane, so you got a really awesome ribbon cane here, and basically turning that into a stringer, stretching it out, something like this here. So you got a ribbon cane that then got stretched out, right? And all of that's been twisted in there. And then learning how to build those up like a colored stringer. Basically like what we just used with pushing that in there, but using a whole bunch of those tiny rods to then create a tiny stringer like this, so then you can form jellyfish. And pushing jellyfish instead of just a one solid color mushroom, you can learn how to build up tentacles, or basically tiny ribbon canes that are 1 millimeter small, building them up around each other with 5 of them, one in the center, and or maybe 6, one in the center and 5 going all the way around, and then a little solid piece of color glass on top of those ribbon canes that are all pulled to about 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter thick stringer, but only a little tiny chunk. We're talking like a 1/4 inch, maybe close to a 1/2 inch. Like very small portion of glass, and using that to then push it into molten clear, turning it into a jellyfish, learning how to turn these into flatbacks and coloring them. So right now, I've basically got all that air bubble out, and I'm rounding the tip now where I pushed it all in. There's like an indentation. So I'm rounding that. And this is the very first lesson for 2025 here at the Glassman's World. We're working here in Gardenia Glass Studios, which that's what my glass is known as, is Gardenia Glass, which basically that's my last name. And so you want to round this out. And anytime that I'm explaining what I'm doing, it takes me a lot longer than doing it. At this point, what I'm doing is I'm going to push it in and out, in and out, in and out of the flame. I'm rocking the molten glass on that tip here to allow it to kind of round out and force it to go into like this, like it kind of gets elongated and then turns into like a teardrop shape, so it really gets nice and round on the bottom there. And then you've got the colored glass inside that you see glowing. It looks like it's white hot right now with the glowing clear glass around it. I would love to be able to keep something like that. Wouldn't it be cool if I could keep the color like that? A red background with a yellow mushroom. That would actually almost look like that. And then we're going to use the punty. Now we just made that punty. So let's go on ahead and use this punty that we formed earlier. We're going to slowly introduce it to the flame because we don't want to pop off that thick portion that's on this tubing, because this is just hollow tubing right here. But we rounded out the tip. So we want to be real careful, and sometimes it does pop off, and if it does, well, you just melt it back down, and then you're okay. Once you can get that glass warm, and it starts to glow like that, then okay, it's safe. I can put a little bit more into the flame and not worry about it popping off. Now I want the punty molten. I want this warm. Hopefully I'm doing this quick enough. We're going to attach that as it's molten. It's going to be like a tack weld. It's not a permanent fusion. We're not fusing the glass together. It's just to hold the hot glass. So then I can go above the mushroom cap here, right on that transition where the clear glass is, but not on the cap though. I don't want to get the cap molten because I don't want to accidentally stretch the top of the cap or the color. It'll then like make it real pointy, like a triangular mushroom tip or whatever. So we want to be pretty precise here and get above the mushroom cap, but not too far up, because we don't want a bunch of negative space in between this pool. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the rod molten, extremely molten. You can see how it's completely bendy right now, but I'm holding it there to get it extremely molten. We're going to then take it out of the flame, give it a quick pull, but stop. And you see how it's about, 2 millimeters thick. Now I'm going to pull it this way, bring it around, use the flame to help me out to bend this, because it's already solidifying, it's getting solid. We're going to allow that flame to allow me to get that molten again. Now this is already hard, but it's still super hot. So we're going to make sure we keep that tip that way. We know this is nice and cool to the touch, but that is hot. So we can put it here on the pad or wherever. And now we need our reamer, one of the most important tools. What we're going to do is we're going to get this portion right here that's sticking out. We're going to get that molten, and we're going to flatten it to the body of the rest of it, and then get all of this molten all at the same time. You can see this is slightly thicker than this portion here. So we're going to allow this glass to kind of gather a little bit more heat, putting the heat on this side a little bit more, and it's going to all round out all at once. It's going to be really quick. So we're going to go with that little nub, heat it up this way by putting the piece above the flame, then going underneath the flame. Do that maybe a couple times, and then using the reamer to mash it down so it's now mashed down with the body. And usually at the same time when that happens, I'll go inside and round this up a little bit to get that ready to go. Now we're going to start spinning the whole entire loop in the flame. When you're beginning, you probably want to bring your flame down. I've been doing this for 30 years now, so I have a lot of control. I'm bringing a lot more of the flame to that thinner portion. Like I said, we're going to thicken that up. We're going to make sure that we hit it to where we forced it down onto the body to make sure that that really seals. And then we just slowly get that whole thing molten. We use the reamer to go inside to round up that hole. And that's pretty much done. As you can see, it's been nice and flattened on that back side around it. You can see where I brought it around here and attached it right there. So I could work this and make it to where it's all super nice and clean and to where it doesn't look like there's any kind of a seam, but that is a pretty solid seal right there. A lot better than what they do in China. These are my $5 mushrooms, so I don't want to spend too much time on these. And then we take our tweezers here, keep them up so the cold metal doesn't shock the glass. We're going to put this inside the loop. Now, only some torches you can do that. The GTT, the glass torch technologies, those are all made with aluminum bodies, aluminum housing, which helps to keep the torch a lot cooler. So you could actually grab the torch. I cannot grab my torch. This would be super hot and I'd burn myself. The glass torch technologies for safety, they're made out of aluminum. Some of them are even water cooled. And yeah, it's just a new torch technology. So now what I'm doing, there was a puntee mark on the bottom. I'm introducing this back into the flame, but from above, and then going underneath it. So now, and I'm also rocking it, so I'm making sure I'm hitting the sides, not just the tip, so the whole portion of this bottom will get molten and all become rounded, nice and just flowing in a nice round shape to get rid of that puntee mark. The jagged glass from when I snapped the puntee off of this, it leaves a jagged mark. So now I hold it straight up and down like this so that molten glass falls, you know, allows for it to fall this way. And then it's all nice and round. This is a done piece. The mushroom's done. It's an orange mushroom, so actually it's going to look almost like that, but not as glowing. So we use this color here. So this is the color of what the mushroom will be. Let's do one more. We're at 49 minutes. I'm going to have to just rush to get ready to go. I'm going to be vending in Nob Hill today if you want to come and visit if you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We'll be down there at Solano on Central, which is Route 66, for those of you who know Route 66. Alright, so now we're going to do basically the same thing. I did want to show you how to pull a stringer. So let's do that real quick, but we're going to use the orange. So to pull a stringer, you need your tweezers. and you need to introduce this. Now this is a lot smaller than this. As you can see, the size. This is 16 millimeter. I would guess this is about 7 to 8 millimeter right here. We could even check it and see what the size is, and that is at oh, what are we measuring in inches? That's in 0.2324, so a 1/4 inch is what that is. What is a 1/4 inch from millimeters? I have no idea. So we're going to introduce that tip. We're going to basically gather, so we're going to round this up and get it all nice and rounded, like just like we did with the bigger clear rod. And we're simply just going to round this tip until it all becomes one rod again, just like that. I don't know if you can see that or not. So now it's all one. It's not bent in any weird way or anything. So now I'm going to heat up even more, about that much of it. So I'm going to basically introduce more of the color. Start with the tip, then bring a little bit more of it into the flame. We're going to grab it as little as we can on the tip here as it's molten, and we're going to pull it. We're going to do a quick pull and then slow down. So, well, kind of quick and then slow down. And now we're going to just slowly stretch it, keeping it nice and basically that same thickness. I want to get it to about 2 millimeters, 2 to 3 millimeters, what I like. Now, usually you'll have a little knob on the end right there. I like to just melt it and then stretch it, so I'm not wasting any of my color. But it's a little hard to just heat up that little portion and stretch just that little bit. But if you want to be like me, you can do that and stretch it to where then you're not wasting any of it. And now we can use that as a stringer to push into the molten clear glass. Now this time we're not going to mushroom it out. That's the trick. And also, if you're not able to pull this, you can easily just do a flame cut by pulling the tip off, which, let me just show you for lesson purposes. We're going to just basically grab this tip here. We'll get it molten, right? We'll grab the tip, and then in the flame, so we'll pull it, right? But then in the flame, you want to be able to pull it and stretch it, and not stretch it like that and get a big old long stringer, like a thin hair sized stringer. You just want to be able to pull it and allow that flame to do a flame cut. So then basically you take that little piece off from there, and now you got a nice clean tip as well. That's another way of doing it. I don't like to waste the color. Color is $60 a pound compared to clear at $6 a pound. So now we're going to get this molten again. And this time, what we're going to do is, as we push the color in, and I'm going to try to do this really quick, guys. So as we push the color in, instead of forcing it in and forcing it in, pushing it in more to allow it to create a mushroom cap, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it in, and as soon as it starts to hit that spot where it will spread out, I will pull it back out. What that's going to do is stop the mushroom cap from forming, and basically just pushing a stringer of glass into the clear glass, a stringer of colored glass. So we're just going to have like a straight piece of glass inside of there. No mushroom, basically the stem of a mushroom, but without the mushroom cap. Now the reason why we're doing this is because we can eventually push a green stringer in there and form it into a flower. We can also learn how to do very detailed mushrooms and other things, other tricks. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to take that same orange that we used, so we can compare these two, the mushroom and this as well, right side by side. We're going to clean up this little tip because it's pulled from when I cut it off that mushroom when we pushed the mushroom earlier. So there was a little bit of a jagged tip on it. So I basically just gathered it, melted it down. So now it's nice and usable, as you can see. We're going to get this molten to where it's basically all white hot, about that much of it, all white hot. We're going to force this in and pull it out. As soon as it hits that spot where it can't go any deeper and it starts to mushroom out, we're going to pull back on it. We're also not going to preheat the tip because we don't want this to mushroom out. So the trick is, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go directly in the center, right? And we're also going to keep the rotation going. We're going to push it in the center. As soon as it hits that point where it starts to mushroom, we're going to pull it back out slowly though. Nice and controlled. And as you can see, instead of making a mushroom, now there's just the colored stringers inside of there. And we're going to cut it off right at the tip. And then I just rounded that up a little bit. So now you can see there's just a colored stringer inside of there. Now the trick is we're going to get this part, the top, hot, work our way down a little bit. We'll put that back in the flame. We're going to use one of our punties here. And I think I have one that's made specifically for, yeah, it's this short one here. So this one's all cracked. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this portion hot. The tip, it's so thin, so it's just going to gather that heat from it flashing off the thicker portion up here. So that's going to get molten all on its own from the heat that's flashing off this way. But you really want to penetrate in the thicker portion of the rod here. And then right before you attach the punty, we're going to heat up the tip just like that. You just go right to the tip of it just like that. And that's going to allow it to attach. And then, so now it's attached to the punty. We're going to keep that flame way up top. That thinner portion, that tip is already spinning. That's why you want to keep your flame up. Sorry about that. Let's reattach it. So I'm just going to get that molten. Reattach. We're going to go right to the tip. Sometimes I make mistakes when I'm trying to explain what I'm doing. So I got that flame right above that the stringer inside of there. And we're basically just spinning it. I don't know if you can see that. So that glass gets so molten that we're spinning the right hand a little bit more than the left. I'm kind of actually using this like brakes. Like slow down, slow down. But this hand is spinning, spinning, spinning. So you just hold that in the flame and it'll continuously stay molten. And if you want a tighter spin or if you want a looser spin or whatever, you can basically make like tornadoes inside, or just a little, what I call little colored spirals. These are also my $5 pendants that I put right alongside my $5 single color mushroom. So then we snap off the punty. There's a punty mark there, but we haven't even done anything to this. So as you can see, it's all jagged, it's not rounded. So now we're going to do the shaping, introducing it back into the flame, heat up the tip, get the tip nice and molten, and it's all just going to start to gather. We're basically going to do that gathering. That's why I showed you in the beginning of this video how to gather glass. I'm also holding this horizontal. I'm not trying to bring it down and make it rounded. I actually like to keep my spirals in an elongated shape. So what I may do is, instead of going at a 45-degree angle down this way, I may actually bring it up to allow it to stretch and not become teardrop shaped, but more elongated shape. More cylindrical than globe. So now I'm just heating it up. I'm going to allow it to just, I'm spinning, 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 always constantly spinning, and allowing it to form itself, holding it kind of downward so this all just gathers down this way. And as you can see, it's more cylindrical. It's basically like the shape of the rod instead of rounding it up and gathering. So now we're going to get our punchy here. This could be the same one we used earlier. It might be a different one. I felt it pop. See that? So now we lost that tip, but all we do is we just put that right in the flame, get it molten. Now we're not going to have to worry about it popping off or anything because it's going to be molten. It's not going from cool to extremely hot. And then we're just going to heat up that tip of the punchy here, which is just a tube that we form a little bit of thickness. Touch it to the tip of that rod, then pull it and kind of like just pull it real gently to like if you're pulling a string and you want to make that string nice and taut. You know, you don't want to have it to be loose or anything. That's how you make it nice and straight. You get a nice straight connection. Even when I'm spinning it, you can see it's not like flip-flopping around and stuff. Then we go above the color, and we're just simply going to do the same thing we did by forming a loop. And we're at an hour in right now, so I'm going to let you guys go as soon as we're done with this one. And that way I can get all packed up and ready to go to vend today down in Nob Hill, Albuquerque, New Mexico. We'll be in front of the 7 Clover. Our friends own the Vaporium shop there on Central, 3801 Central. And so we use that patio right outside, right in front of 7 Clover and the Thai Vegan Heritage. So if you want to grab some food, also pharmacy is right across the street as well. So if you want to come by, get yourself some breakfast or lunch. We'll be there from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. That's why I got to rush because it's almost 9 and I got to get packed up and get going. And I still got to try to do a few dishes to help out my wife. That way she's not having to do so much this morning on her own. It's hard with her disability, so I try to do what I can for her before I got to do what I can for myself. So I'm going to just rush out here real quick, guys. We're just rounding this out, making sure it's nice and straight. I see it's leaning towards one side a little bit, so I'm going to heat up the bottom of the loop there, and we're going to just basically use the reamer to push it over and pull upward. So I'm pushing this way and pulling upward like this, as on the inside there, pushing and pulling upward, and it allows it to stretch nice and straight. We then heat up the tweezers once again so we don't shock the glass. These are probably warm, so they probably wouldn't shock it at this point, but when you start out in the mornings, you definitely want to make sure. Then snap it off. If you can't snap it here, maybe snap it on your stand, the side of your table, somewhere. You may even be able to just grab it and just snap it, just like that. But my torch is strong enough to withstand that. You can't do that on the glass torch technologies or any torch that's made with an aluminum housing, aluminum body. All right, so now we're going to clean up the punchy mark. We're basically going to go underneath and go above and go underneath and go above. And also doing that whole rocking back and forth to make sure you're getting that whole surface. So you're getting that whole area nice and rounded. Then holding it straight up and down, allowing for that molten glass to just fall into place, get rounded, get rid of that punchy mark, and we're done for the day. So this is an orange spiral, and this is the orange mushroom that we just finished. So that's what the orange looks like right there. It's a crayon orange and a spiral. As you can see, that spiral's in there. It's nice and elongated. So there's 2 more $5 pieces. I make these a lot quicker when I'm not describing and giving instructions on how they're made. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but I turned off the oxygen first, then propane. If you do it the other way, the propane will pop make a really loud, like almost like something bangs, you know. So you want to make sure you always do the propane oxygen to turn it on, oxygen propane to turn it off, or what we know as poop, standard poop. All right. So there's your first lessons of 2025. I will try to do maybe we'll do weekly lessons on Sundays in the mornings. I'm not sure. I don't know. It might not work out so well if I'm going to be vending on Sundays. I may want to give myself a little more time. We can also do this Sunday afternoons if that seems to work out better for those of you. I know a lot of you may be going to church right now. A lot of you are also sleeping in because it's the weekend. So maybe afternoons on Sundays after everyone gets out of church and everyone's had their lunch or their brunch, then maybe at that point it'll be a little bit better. So maybe, you know, when I come back from vending, I can get on the torch and do a little bit of glass blowing lessons. Maybe we'll even come back later on today just to see how the algorithms are and see how many individuals come in. We had a few guests come in today. No one said hello or chatted. It's fine. Not concerned about that. Just want to make sure I'm getting these lessons out to you guys. And hopefully this helps and inspires those of you who are interested in getting into lamp working or glass blowing. All right, thanks for watching. I'm Dan the Glass Man. This is the Glass Man's World. You guys have a beautiful Sunday. I'll see you soon. We'll probably come back later just to test it out. I normally get home after 3 o'clock, so let's say about 4, the 4 o'clock, 4:20 hour. All right, you guys have a beautiful day. Talk to you soon.